Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres. If this is the first time you tune in, you'll want to know that this is the show that gives visibility to the top voices in consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond. We're now well over 200 episodes in, so do go into your favorite podcast player, our website, to reminisce some of the top episodes we've had on the show and learn from the industry's top voices. And remember, we are a part of a family of podcasts, which is headed by the CPG guys at the other side of the Atlantic in the US. So do go into the show to learn about what's happening in consumer goods, that part of the world. And I'm joined by two luminaries of the industry today. On one hand is my co-host, Christina Nicolau. Hi, Christina. How are you?
Hi, Daniel. I'm doing very well. I guess luminaries is your favorite word of the year.
Yeah, probably. Let's leave it at that, because if I start thinking of other words, it would probably not go down a rabbit hole I don't want to go. But how are things? All good?
All good here in Greece. Raining today. Christmas decorations are up. So kind of a version of winter coming our way.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, Barcelona every time is less Christmassy because they're trying to make it neutral and try to please everyone with the Christmas decorations. And when you try to please everyone, it doesn't normally work. But anyway, it is a good time of the year. So we very recently hosted the CEO of STRATACACHE, Chris Regal, on the show, who spoke about the 7 deadly sins of in-store retail media. By the way, you'll find the link in the show notes because that is a must listen. And today we have the pleasure to welcome somebody else from STRATACACHE, who is Ben Reynolds, who heads up the Walkbase division, which is the division that looks after analytics and AI. And with him, we'll take it to the next level when it comes to in-store. And we'll talk about the in and out. So what is it? How can retailers and brands be jointly successful in this environment? What are the latest trends and how to get basically the best out of it? So here's Ben. Hi, Ben. How are you? Good to see you virtually this time after running into each other. And we were talking before, at least at one event, we showed that we walked into each other at Shop Talk 2023. But I think we probably ran into each other at other places. And I think we will continue to walk into each other as well. Excellent. So now you've been at STRATACACHE for a few years, but I know that your background is actually in FMCG or CPG. Tell us a bit about that.
To be here. So my background is a mix of kind of technology, media, and CPG, starting with Sara Lee way back in the day. I was an accountant, and then I went to back to grad school and went into marketing and sales, selling fun, fat food. So cheesecake and apple pie and pound cake and all the good stuff. So the sales calls were always fun. Made a shift over to the technology, working for PRN, ironically, which is now part of a STRATACACHE company. But at that time, we weren't. We were independent, and we were one of the first movers kind of into the in-store retail media space. So working with very large North American retailers, Walmart, Best Buy, Target, Costco, Sam's, et cetera, and helping them build out their first retail media networks in store and doing everything, sales and operations of all those networks, technology, of course. And then moved, really kind of into the pure digital space. So Hook Logic, which was really the first non-Amazon sponsored ads on folks like Walmart, Target, Best Buy. And we built up a network that was then sold to what is now powering Criteo's retail media network, which is cool. And then finally, before coming back to STRATACACHE, I worked for a company called MaxPoint, which early on built one of the first identity graphs, digital marketing identity graphs, based on kind of serving ads based on your household behavior, both consuming content online and offline, and then kind of trying that tie back to your local store. So kind of a precursor of some of the digital shopper marketing efforts you see today. So, and then I came back to STRATACACHE at the time that Walkbase was acquired in 2017. I got to know Chris a little bit. You spoke with him a couple of days ago. I knew him in the industry, but when I saw that purchase, the idea of kind of understanding in-store behavior from the moment they come in the door to the moment they transact was a real opportunity. And so I've been with STRATACACHE ever since, and it's been a great ride.
Then you really have had like a career that has the points of view from all the different, let's say, aspects that you can get. So could you explain to our listeners who might not also be experts now, what is Walkbase and what do you guys do?
Yeah, thank you, Christine. So Walkbase is analytics and AI company based in Turku, Finland. It was founded, I should say, in Turku, Finland by 4 guys doing their graduate work on indoor location analytics. So way back in 2012, they saw an opportunity to say, hey, I think we can do a better job of tracking and understanding behavior. And it's evolved. Even then, technology has evolved since then. So the founders are still with the company, still doing great work. The platform itself is really about, it's a platform. We have various technologies, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but it's really about taking that location data the signals that you get from the store, whether it's a Wi-Fi signal, Bluetooth signal, a cell phone, even RFID, third-party data, first-party data, and really trying to create a picture of taking all the data in and making actionable insights out of that. So I really understand at a granular level. If you think about it, the elevator speech for us is always, Amazon or an e-commerce site knows where I come from, what I click on, what I buy, and where I go next. Let's have that same dynamic level of information for your brick and mortar environment, and then being able to measure and activate on that. And that's what Walkbase does for a retailer environment.
Yeah, and you've worked in CPG, you've worked like in in-store analytics, then you went more like to the online part, and now you're back in in-store. So why do you think that in-store analytics and retail media are exciting at the moment? Because you yourself have made a personal bet on it, if you like.
Yeah, it's a good question, Andy. So I think we're at a tipping point with retail media and specifically the in-store space. So what I've noticed, and I'm sure we'll talk about the differences, globally, what you see over here. But in North America, with some of the larger networks, they've done such a good job of monetizing their on-site behavior and even their mobile behavior to a point where they're running out of inventory, to finite amount of inventory that they can do. So, and the largest audience they have are actually in store, where 80-85% of their sales are. And their audiences are 2 or 3x what their e-commerce sites are. So the combination of audiences being so big, the sales being so much larger, and then the other 2 things I'd say is it's an owned property, right? The margins on selling an owned property are much larger than having to, work with your data on a social or a CTV site or something else. And then the CapEx that's required is starting to come down drastically. So the ROI is making a lot of sense. So a lot of those reasons, I'd say. Yeah.
Because if you had to do like a fixed picture of what in-store retail media is looking like today in terms of like activation, what would we be talking about? Like if you had a store, would it be like the cardboards that brands place? What are the different like types of activations that we can see today?
Yeah, I mean, look, you see, I would say they're all over the place. I mean, and every retailer does it differently. Yeah, definitely you have some really well executed static things. I mean, to the point where I remember going to Mexico City 10, 15 years ago and just being overwhelmed by how much visual messaging there was, visual merchandising, we used to call it. And they were just like, every piece of the store had to the point where even the security bars that would checked my product, RFID product in and out, had this great covering on it. I think what's happening, we're definitely evolving to more digital, which is great. I think it's more cleaner, certainly environmentally friendly, and then also dynamic, right? And I will say that I don't think you're going to see a lot of what I'll call Times Square in the US, where, you're just surrounded by media the whole time. That's not the point. You're going to the store to shop. you don't want to interrupt that experience, but you want to enhance that experience with digital media. So you need to be strategic where the placements are. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see, it's not going to be 30 or 40 screens in the store. It's going to be 5 or 6, very strategic with great content that enhances that shopping trip.
I was very surprised to see in Serbia a few months ago, actually, there were even digital screens like on the shelf where you expect to have like the price tags, and they had some kind of like long format digital screens that were giving information about the product. It feels like it's evolving across different markets with different maturity levels, but everyone is innovating.
Yeah, I would agree, Christine. And what's interesting, one of the differences I always see, in Europe, I think the in-store is much further along than the US and North America. And then a little bit in Australia too, you see a lot of in-store execution. And so but I would call that was phase 1, right? You have folks in the UK like Tesco who did a ton of investment, 20 years ago, and now they're evolving. They're seeing a lot more. And so, in the US, I was telling Daniel earlier, we were one of the first that invested, but then the e-commerce was such a huge opportunity that all their investment went to that. Now it's coming back. They're like I said earlier, the CapEx has come down, the opportunity to have your owned property and then being able to monetize that audience in a meaningful way is really attractive.
But let's do a little bit that connection with e-commerce, right? I was working in e-commerce before, so I feel like it's pretty clear to me how we can measure stuff. And you can measure pretty much everything in a digital store, like from the moment that you make your first click, following you throughout the path, the backs and forths, how many times you are clicking on a specific banner or a promoted product. All that is very clear when it comes to like, how do I measure my retail media in an e-commerce site? So what would be the equivalent in measuring when it comes to a physical store?
That's a great question. So I like to think you need to measure your store just like you do all your other digital properties. But how do you do that? Is really the question. Mm-hmm. So I refer to it as clickstream behavior for the store. So understanding, pathing. Where I'm coming in a certain route. I'm visiting these pages. I'm visiting these aisles. I'm clicking on something in the store. I'm stopping somewhere. I'm showing intent. I've gone now to the next area of the store. And being able to understand at a very granular level, kind of pathing, dwell, exactly where I'm spending time in the store. And then also, how is my behavior changing based on the content and the product that's being presented to me? So it's important to track all that. And the good news is that there are not just ours, but there's a lot of technologies out there today that can help you understand behavior in the store, just like you would on an e-commerce site, and then being able to track that back.
Well, you would even do something like A/B testing kind of way in the store. So you have a specific path, you change a certain level of communication or perhaps the medium that you're using at this specific point, and then you see again how this behavior has evolved.
Yeah. So imagine, I'm just thinking of 2 examples, right? Right. You might have a digital screen in produce who has an A/B test of a cross promotion, So, whether I'm using something I might buy in produce with a picnic that product is way across the store. You can, am I driving behavior? Am I driving traffic to that area with that ad and do an A/B test that way? Or maybe it's on my mobile device through the retailer's app. There's a lot of different ways to communicate with that customer. And it's important to understand the efficacy of your media in real time and being able to say, hey, I'm driving my desired behavior. Because as a marketer, if I can drive traffic to the area of the store that I'm advertising for, I've done most of my job. If they don't convert, there might be something with product price or something else going on. But I've got that behavior. And so understanding in-store customer behavior is a key point to kind of delivering on the efficacy of your media.
And what are the types of like technologies and platforms in the market right now that help retailers better understand what's happening in the stores? And then obviously give that data to brands as well.
Right. The brands would love it, as we all know. As a brand marketer, I would have killed to understand which end caps were the most trafficked and had the highest engagement. There's a lot of different technologies. So there's counters as you come through the door. Those are they could be anywhere from infrared counters to, we call them optical sensors. And I'm careful with my wording because, everything has to be privacy friendly and not capturing any PII or biometric. In the store, there's RFID sensors, there's computer vision. We tend to stick with Bluetooth technology in the stores and tagging the cart and understanding and placing locators throughout. So we're following that cart as they go around the store. It doesn't know at this point that it's Ben, but that same technology could follow the mobile device through an SDK. Back in the day when Wi-Fi was more prevalent, but that's kind of been limited with what Google and Apple have done the last 5 or 6 years. So there's a number of different technologies, and there's more came up every day. And I think the most important thing is you have to have a platform that can capture these signals, all these signals that are coming from these devices and in real time, and being able to translate that into actionable data. So by that, I mean, if a synonymous, I'm an unknown customer, how do I aggregate some of these audiences and tie that back to the media being shown in the store? And then ultimately the customer data platforms or the loyalty programs, or if I'm a known customer. And then if, now I've opted in and I can, do I want to show personalized advertising, or do I want to, send some messaging to the phone based on where I am in the store? There's folks doing something similar to that today in the US. So there's a lot of different technologies. I think the most important thing is that you have a sophisticated platform that can help make sense of it, and then tie it into that digital ecosystem that everybody's built so well. Being able to serve an ad quickly, being able to have a rich customer loyalty program, and being able to tie into that.
And one thing in e-commerce retail media that's a bit of a point of debate, let's say, it's the standardization. And I think that the IAB has recently released some standards for in-store measurement, right?
Yeah. So, and I think this, you talk about what's going to change over the next 3 years. I think this is one of going to be the key drivers for in-store going forward. So it's been really haphazard how people measure in-store media. They could just say, I see this number of transactions, so that must be how many people visit a department. I see this many people coming through the door. But really, what the new standards are doing is that no, it needs to be much more granular. If you're going to say somebody was in the produce section or the deli section or the electronics section, you need to be able to say that they were in the zone and they had an opportunity to view, and the media played for a certain duration, and you need to have a platform that kind of captured all that data and then ties that back. And the reason it's important, and Christine would tell you from her CPG experience, of they're going to demand it. As a CPG investor, yes, I'm going to try something once or twice, but I need measurement just for me to be able to say that was worth my investment. And the standardization from a CPG is really important to me, because I don't want to have to do this 17 different times in 17 different ways across retail. For me to justify a significant amount of my investment, I need it measured correctly. I need to know that it worked or it didn't work, and I can optimize. And then I don't want to have to do it, 17 different ways, because that's too complicated for me.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see how that evolves, because how can retailers actually apply these standards? I don't know if is there like a way to start, or?
Yeah, I think I always look at it as a kind of a crawl, walk, run strategy, So the crawl is you start with something, don't think of it as this like enormous project that I have to go to every store immediately. But, let's take, 2 to 5 stores, and let's get these systems in place so that I'm capturing the data. And then let's make sure that I have the Mr. Retailer, have the systems in place to be able to ingest this data and combine it with all these other things. The walk phase is I need to prove an ROI. So now I'm going to go to, 10, 15% of my stores and I'm going to say, I'm invest, I need to know that if I put this CapEx in, the ROI is there. And, as a company, we strongly believe it is, just because all the reasons we talked about earlier, why in-store is attractive, right? And so you have to prove that ROI, and then you go to run. So it's not like, it's really important and you can do this in relatively quickly. I mean, this is like a year, 18 months. I mean, I know it's not as quick as e-commerce, but you can do that relatively quickly. But I think it's important that you start small and then scale versus trying to do everything at once.
Yeah, and coming on the brand versus retailer conversation here, right? And as you said, CPGs are going to want to be able to measure. Most of the times, or at least my expectation is that the first point of discussion is going to be, okay, how have my sales picked up? Which is like a very direct thing to conversion. But coming back also to the discussion about the efficacy of the media overall, it might be that you have other jobs to be done. For example, you might be looking to grow the category or look at how adjacencies work. Do you have any examples of other things that's worth like measuring or trying to influence through the use of in-store retail media?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I would say the adjacency piece is an interesting one. We've definitely looked at at an end cap level, how people are performing. And, what's interesting there with in-store behavior data is that if you just look at sales, you could say, oh, that ad or that product didn't perform well. But when you add this behavioral data in, you can say, well, wait a minute, I've got a high traffic, high dwell time piece of real estate in my store, but it's not showing sales. So there's an opportunity there to better merchandise or better message to be able to do that. So we've done that many, many times with retailers to be able to try and do that. The other thing I would say is we've looked at like within an aisle, are things placed correctly? So we'll look at a retailer might do different medias like in the middle of the aisle, towards the end of the aisle, or even product resets. And they're looking at, did I change they wanted to get more traffic down the aisle. And in order to do that, you have to be able to understand the customer behavior. So there's a lot of things. I mean, once you have the kind of the platform set up, there's a lot of things you can do to kind of understand how people are, navigating the store.
It's like we're building up like this missing part of the waterfall on the things that are driving sales and overall the category and the consumer behavior.
Yeah. I think there's some other things too, so when you have the platform to set up, so one of the things that we do at Walkbase is we try and create, for every path in the store, we create like a unique identifier. And then that identifier could be matched at a transaction. So imagine if you're with a customer that has a high loyalty program, say it's a membership club, or 80 or 90% of your transactions I'm identifying as a loyal customer. They don't know that it's me as I'm walking through, but they can start to add my pathing behavior. Once I identify myself as a loyal customer, they can start to add my pathing behavior. And the reason I say that is you talked about media efficacy is imagine I'm an electronics customer. I'm searching for TVs online. I'm doing a lot of research because it's a high consideration product. And now I'm in the store and I'm in front of that TV and I'm showing interest. I'm showing intent, but I don't convert, so I'm sending a signal to the retailer, that another signal, not just that I researched it online, but now that I'm in store. So that's what's kind of been missing before. You talked about of like, where are the intent signals coming from the store and how do we capture those like we do like online? And that's really what, we're trying to solve for in kind of this in-store behavioral piece.
You know what this reminds me? Back in digital, we're trying to advocate for the right way to invest behind e-commerce, like regardless of the size of it, because we're advocating for the existence of digital influence sales, and we had zero data to be able to prove that. So It feels like it's this connection, right, of perhaps using just the loyalty program of a retailer and be able to see like who looked at what. And it's as even if you do like a pixel tracking but you've gone into the digital world in a way.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Christy. I mean, or imagine like I want to reach, 30% of the people that visited the pet aisle and didn't convert, or I'm even this, I'm a non-endemic advertiser and I've got a healthy product. And I know that people that shop organic products in produce are likely my customers, so there's just, and as we started this conversation, why in store? Well, the audiences in store and the traffic in store is much bigger than e-commerce. So now I'm now adding a huge amount of data to my customer data platform for retail media networks to now leverage to be able to monetize. And so hopefully in a really customer friendly way, I'd say. Yeah.
Sorry, Christina. I thought you wanted to ask something about loyalty. I'll go ahead. I'll get all this edited later. Don't worry. So one may ask themselves as they're listening to this, Ben, what about privacy? Like, you have famously GDPR here in Europe, but I'm sure other countries also have their own regulations. Like, how do you ensure that you can build all these personas, which are super useful to then target? And as you said also, which is interesting, how you actually merchandise in store. How do you comply?
Yeah, it's imperative, right? So I was at the Mexico show in Cologne early this year and was talking to a lot of your folks on digital marketing. And a comment came up to me that I really liked. And he said, basically, don't look at it as like an obstacle, look at it as an opportunity to innovate. And I really like the way that thinking. Yes, because we all know GDPR is not going away. And one of the things I learned when I was over there this year is that every country is different. Germany, France, the UK, Netherlands, they all have different applications of GDPR and how they apply it. So there's additional layers. The most important thing is you have to be, first of all, if you're doing anything to understand consumer behavior, it has to be anonymous. You're not identifying anything at the start. So, no biometrics, no personally identifiable information, nothing along those ways. And that's where we see computer vision struggling sometimes because it has the opportunity to capture some biometrics. I know a lot of systems don't, and they blur it and all that stuff, but retailers are not. They can be conservative, let's say, when it comes to privacy. So, we tend to stay away from computer vision products because of that. Then, but how do I tie it to loyalty? We have to have an opt-in. You have to have somebody expressly opt in. And the way you would do that is a number of different ways. Even if you're tracking behavior and not identifying Daniel or Christine, you're going to have some signage as you walk in the store saying, hey, we're helping understand customer behavior in the store to better serve your product. And if you want to opt out, go to this website or something like that. And then it's all done through the loyalty program. So through the T's and C's of the loyalty program, and the way you'll be able to opt in is as if I'm signing up as a loyal customer, I'm going to allow my behavior to track. It becomes a value exchange, right? What am I getting in exchange? And I'm either going to say, yay, if my experience is better, or you're offering me better, more relevant products, or I can get through the store quicker, great. If you're just doing it to collect my data and make money off of me and it doesn't do anything for me, probably not going to work. So, that's what it really comes down to. But you have to get that express opt-in, and it's typically done through the loyalty program.
It's like a physical version of cookies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, as I have it in my head.
Yeah.
So listen, okay, for example, with cookies and with all the things that are happening online, you get a bit more tailored content. I'm wondering on the way that we're activating them digitally, either online and the way that we might be targeting people, or then within the store, the way that we're curating kind of the content of now what we have in the various retail media. How can we tailor it? Do you do a cohort of this person has this kind of behavior, or would you go more into here's what I've learned from the people in the customer in the specific retailer?
So I think it's all the above. So
okay.
I mean, if I'm just leveraging behavior from the store, I might say you can start to, if you got a platform in there that really understands at a granular level and it's been there for 3-6 months, you can start to do some really good predictive analytics that, hey, if folks are in produce, they're likely to visit these 3 next departments in this sequence. And that content on that screen is going to be reflective of that. And it could change by time of day, day of week. So how I shop the store on a Tuesday morning is a lot different than a Friday afternoon at a 5 p.m. And I want to make sure the content is reflective of that. And that's going to enhance my shopping experience. And then, of course, if I'm over time, if I'm capturing some of this and tying it to a loyalty program, now I've got a much richer data set of past purchase history, demographics, all this stuff. And again, it's more cohort, like you said. It's unlikely that you're going to, on a digital screen that's broadcasting to many people, that I'm going to signal out, hey, Christine, welcome back again.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening, and I wouldn't recommend that. But if we know that folks that, like I said, on a Friday afternoon are looking for 3 meal items to get home, and they're likely to visit these departments, you can curate the content based on how people are behaving in the store.
It wouldn't be like, I bought wine yesterday, therefore today I'm getting served seeds commercials or whatever.
Yeah. So some wine and cheese and bread for your party. Yeah.
Actually, now that we talk about that, are there any interesting or counterintuitive data points that you found in the last few years that would call our attention?
Like when we listen to Britney Spears, it rains. This kind of
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but Britney Spears has now moved out of America. She's left the country. So political aside. Yeah. Going back to your question, Daniel, you do get a lot of data that you wouldn't expect. So it's data that they don't have, that retailers and brands don't have today, And so this is an immediate example, but it has relevance. One of our customers was looking to do a cut through or eliminate a cut through in their store. And they looked at our data and they realized it was going from produce to their wine and beer section for Christine. And so they realized that it was the most trafficked aisle in the store. And they were looking to eliminate that. And they were going to create a huge congestion point by doing so. So, it's those types of things that were it would have had a lot of unintended consequences had they not had the data to be able to support a better decision.
Well, and are there any best practices when it comes to in-store that you would say that our listeners need to take away from this conversation? Things that are working in-store for in-store measurement today?
So I think there's a number of things. One, you have to be able to tie an ad to an impression. So it goes back to the standards that were just released and being able to, it's not enough to be able to say they just walked through the door and I'm guessing that 30% went to the produce section or the deli section. You need to be able to quantify that. And then you need to be able to report back and be transparent about that, right? So I think that's number one. Number two, it's more sophisticated, but then how can we leverage this behavior both to our customer data platform and then outside the store? So I think that's, when I say a best practice, but it's also one of these things that's really going to grow over the next 1 to 3 years of kind of adding this data to the customer data part and being able to activate based on that. The final thing is I think you need something that's really accurate. I know it sounds simple, but I'm sure you guys, even in the digital world, remember how many times we were wondering, is that a real ad spot? Is that just a bot or something like that? You need a system that's able, A, to be, reliably deliver an ad, and B, reliably be able to report on it so that you create an element of trust so that brands are going to invest more readily with you. If you're looking to grow your retail media network 30, 40%, you have to have those systems in place to be able to operate like a media company, And so I know those are blocking and tackling for those of us who are in the media business, but for a retailer who is really in the process of selling goods. In-store is a little harder than e-commerce. It requires equipment. It requires everything to be up 99.9% of the time. It requires systems to be able to operate that, and requires systems to be able to report on that. So it's not hard. The execution of it doesn't happen overnight. I'll just say that.
Yeah, there is a certain level of change management that needs to come with it, which I guess would be a challenge. Yeah. But tell us, Ben, like we discussed a little bit before about the new standards from IAB, and you said like, okay, these are some of the things that are changing in the next 3 years. What else? Give us a prediction. Like, how do you see the retail media and in-store media landscape evolving?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to break it up a little bit between Europe and North America. Okay, so for Europe, what I see is they started in store and moved online. And so, like I said earlier, Europe invested way more in screens and digital content 10, 15 years ago than North America did. Now what I've seen is what's happening is it's phase 2 of that investment, right? So we're going to make the screen smarter. We're going to make them more dynamic. The content's going to be better. The mobile device is going to play a much bigger play in this. Loyalty, all the things that, you can do digitally, you want to be able to do digitally in store. It's not just a screen playing a loop. It's going to be a lot smarter. And some of the things you talked about, Christine, shelf edge displays, interactive kiosks. There's going to be a lot of different things that are coming to Europe that I think, and then I think they're going to be strategic about it. It's not going to be the New York Times or the Times Square, that we mentioned, but also, where are the 5 or 6 places that make sense from a customer shopping experience, but also give me the broadest opportunity to monetize that audience. In North America, I think it's just starting. It's ironic. When I say I would say every major retailer in the U.S. is now looking at some form of in-store, whether that's 1 or 2 screens or 10. and so I think you're going to see a huge growth there. I'm sure you guys follow Andrew Lipson quite a lot, and a lot of his stuff is he really sees that as kind of the third wave in terms of being able to, or the second wave maybe, being able to get into the store and monetize that audience. So I think you're going to see a lot of investment, but I think it's going to be strategic. And by that I mean is, if you're going back to my crawl, walk, run strategy, you're not going to blanket the store with screens. It's going to be 5%, and then you've got to be able to measure it. So interesting enough, I've been kind of in the in-store behavioral piece for 7 or 8 years now, and and you guys have all been in sales. I was out there talking about this product. And the conversations 4 or 5 years ago where I had to say, well, why am I here? I had to evangelize. I had to convince somebody to even take a meeting. And then once I did, I had to convince them why they needed it. And then they had to go get budget for it. So you can imagine, we're actually now getting RFPs just for measurement of in-store media, So that's how far we've come in terms of, the demand for it, but also how retailers and brands are thinking about it.
Yeah, big change of mindset, obviously. Actually, if anyone wants to learn more about STRATACACHE and specifically about the analytics and IA division of Walkbase, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Obviously, we'll leave your LinkedIn profile in the show notes.
Yeah. Well, obviously our websites, we just redid our website at walkbase.com. So that's a great way to learn more about that. STRATACACHE.com is a great resource as well. And then, as you talked about, Daniel, we're at every show. So we'll be at NRF. We're doing in fact, irrelevant to this topic, on the 12th of January, we're hosting called What's in Store for Retail Media. And it's a full day of industry experts. And I promise you'll be lucky you'll hear from Chris, but maybe that's probably the only person from STRATACACHE. Everybody else is going to be industry experts talking about the state we're in and kind of the questions you had. Where do we go next? What do we see as innovative, and how as an industry do we make it happen? And so we're really excited, and that'll be in New York on January 12th.
Excellent. I'll be there. I'll be there as well. So we ask this question to all our guests, which is, if you went back to the beginning of your career, before you even joined Sara Lee, with everything that you've learned across tech, media, CPG, if you had to give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of was if I knew then what I know now. Like that's
I know it.
What I would say is the people you work with are probably the most important things as opposed to product or money. And two reasons. One, the quality of folks that you, and I don't mean I haven't, because I worked with some amazing people, but like where I am now, I love the people I work with, and it makes my job enjoyable every day. I like coming to work. I like what I do. As opposed to a young kid who's like, oh, what's the highest salary I can get? And it's like, I would definitely go back and tell that kid, it's like, hey, you got it all wrong. So, pretty good.
This was Ben Reynolds, head of Walkbase, a division of STRATACACHE. Christina, what are your key takeaways from this conversation?
First of all, I have to say, Daniel, that I love that we had the digital or tech-oriented conversation, but we're not speaking about e-commerce and digital self and just, things that are on a screen at home. But we're rather speaking about kind of like the physical world and the interactions that you're having with technology within that. So I felt like this is a very interesting part because, yes, indeed, retail media in the grand scheme of things have been a buzzword. A lot of people have been talking about it. But when it comes to talking about retail media in store, I get a feeling that many times we try to avoid that conversation because we're not really sure, like, how do we pack this now? How do we understand it? How do we measure it? So I love that we had this talk with Ben.
Yeah, he talked about like basically measuring the store like you would measure an online path, because I think that a lot of the hype around retail media, and rightly so, is around like that you can track the customer as they go into your website, buy whatever, and then check out, and you can like create personas. But he's demonstrated here that if you have the right tech and the right analytics in place, you can actually learn a lot from your in-store customers, which are like 90% of the customers. And in some markets, like in Germany, 97%, right?
Yes, exactly. And we even talked about how you can do A/B testing, like things that you would not normally they wouldn't normally come to your mind when it comes to what can I do in store. It would most probably be like, okay, let me put a little stand with some extra product here or do some cross-category promotions, right? But now we're talking about driving behavior and actually measuring the way that your ad or whatever kind of promotional material you decide to put in store is actually changing the behavior of your consumers. So first of all, you need to have a way to capture the signals and to deliver this path if you want. And then you need to understand how you're interrupting it and measure how this interruption is creating change.
Yeah, I would actually recommend that to anyone that if they haven't, that they go back to Chris Regal's episode, also from STRATACACHE, where he talked about the more logistical side of in-store retail media, because it ties very nicely with this episode. Any other takeaways? I think also the differences between Europe and North America, I think quite interesting.
It is quite interesting because from what Ben also mentioned, we have seen two different big markets being on two different speeds, with Europe kind of like being ahead in the game a little bit. With things that we have already started seeing, like being a bit smarter and a little bit better at creating these kind of disruptions in store, the way that in Europe we're using mobile and the way that we're using loyalty. So we see that we're already at a really good state, and we can only see that evolving in the future. And what's really going to change is measurement. Coming from a brand side, Daniel, I have to tell you, this is the number one thing that we're getting after, right? So if you want to implement the change, you need to be able to provide not necessarily the ROI, because at the first stage, at least, you will not be able to tie it to actual sales, but at least what is the KPI that you're going to be measuring so that you know that you're successful. So far, neither the retailers nor the brands had this ability. So this is where I feel like it's going to make a really big difference. And we're going to see more brands and more retailers trying to test and learn as this technology becomes a little bit more democratized, if you want.
Yeah. Because then there's the promise of like that in-store data you'll be able to use on predictive analytics, for example, which I think is a bit where you were going to in terms of next steps, no?
Yes, and as Ben mentioned, the first step that you would have to do in order to have this predictive analytics is to be able to tie an attitude to measurement, and then to be able to activate unique data IDs. That's going to be a huge game changer for me. When you are able to have, all the retailers that have strong loyalty programs, they are able then to also explain how their customers are behaving in store and also outside on their digital platforms and connected journey. This is going to be huge for all brands that are trying to maximize the return they have on their investment when it comes to retail media. And then the final part, of course, is going to be that you need to reliably deliver these ads and support your customers, your consumers, and actually influence the path across the way and measure it. That's it.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot for your takeaways as always, Christina. Thanks to our audience as well for tuning in as always. And we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys. Have a great one.